This week, the much-anticipated Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition will hit the stands, and this particular issue has the media abuzz due to its historic featuring of a plus-size model. No, not on the cover or on any of the spreads. It's just an advertisement featuring curvy model Ashley Graham. One problem though, Graham is a size 14, the exact same size as the average American woman. So what does it mean that the average woman is considered plus size by the mainstream media? Well, one best-selling author who has consistently tackled this issue is Naomi Wolf, and she joined me earlier to discuss everything from body image to the vagina. I began by asking her how societal beauty standards have risen in conjunction with female power.
There was this huge push forward in the 70s of the last century by women, and all these laws introduced in the West to give women equal access to credit and education and equal access to protection under the law. And at the same time, the beauty ideal changed quite a bit very abruptly. We had Twiggy the same year that women got the pill. Suddenly a very kind of anorexic, sort of sexless ideal. And then as the 70s unfolded, the ideal became sort of thinner and thinner, into the 80s, more and more surgically modified, more and more kind of surreal and distant from, the average woman's real self. And so now, actually not just in the West, but all over the world, you ask women what's the ideal according to magazines and advertising, and they all describe, a very tall, extremely thin, breast-enhanced, white woman, usually with blonde hair, who has been now altered with computer technology, so, completely far from what any woman, looks like or can live up to. And the reason for that, I think unconsciously, is that as women became more powerful, it's always threatening to society when there's that kind of social change or progress from any sector. And so these ideals became more and more unattainable, so as to kind of open up a new arena of anxiety and lack of self-confidence, and also kind of pointless, effort in women who are otherwise becoming hyper-empowered.
And you discussed the concept of an Iron Maiden, which punishes women for not attaining that impossible standard. I wanted you to talk about what facets of society are women most assaulted by this beauty myth.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it definitely changes, from decade to decade. I wrote the book in the early 90s when I was quite young, and I was in college and noticing that all these extremely brilliant, ambitious young women around me had very high anorexia and bulimia levels, or exercise fixations. And I thought how extraordinary that these kind of most privileged, most empowered young women of this most privileged generation to inherit the gains of feminism would be so disempowered in terms of their relationship to their bodies. So that was what gave me, this metaphor of the Iron Maiden. They were free but not free. And
that there is a G-spot. I think that a lot of women are very frustrated trying to attain something that may not be attainable. Naomi, what do you think?
People keep debunking an experience that any number of women have attested to, and it's almost like, why don't women's personal accounts of their own bodies matter? Some women have G-spot orgasms and some women don't. And just because Western science hasn't identified a different cellular structure of that part of the inner wall of the vagina doesn't mean that women aren't having important sensations that result in what they experience as orgasm. Some women are very variable, and one of the things that I learned in my research about vaginas is that, for Vagina, the book, is that there's this extraordinary variability in the neural wiring, pelvic neural wiring of every woman. So that's why every woman's sexual response pattern is so unique and individual, as opposed to male pelvic wiring, which is really quite straightforward. Not that men aren't different, but mechanically they're quite similar in terms of sexual response, what triggers orgasm for men. So where I'm going with this is that some women do and some women don't. But what's very important is that researchers have found that, we know about the clitoris, right? But researchers have found that actually the clitoris is just the one tiny bit of a neural structure, I wish there was better language for this, that extends back into the pelvis such that the clitoris is the north of it and the G-spot is the south. And the reason this is important is that women may think they haven't found their G-spot yet, and fair enough, women are wired differently, as I said. However, in another study, over 90% of women reached orgasm in lab conditions with strangers when both of those points were, stimulated at the same time. And this is really big news because actually only 30% of women reach orgasm regularly in intercourse. And that statistic hasn't changed since 1976, since Sheer Height's first research into this, and that's not a good statistic.
Right, and well, I wanted to jump in here really quick because I think that statistic speaks volumes about where we're at as a society, because I think, when you're looking at pornography or when you're even looking at movies and TV and then it shows, people climaxing together, and it kind of perpetuates this myth where women, I feel like, strive to attain that, and they don't understand maybe that some people can't, or, men feel like they're demasculated if they can. I mean, I just feel like, how can we kind of open this dialogue up and talk about how things are a lot more complex?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, you're completely right. A whole generation is growing up learning about sex from pornography, and pornography almost never, shows the kinds of things that lead women to reach orgasm consistently, which involve, time and stroking in various sensitive ways and all kinds of rhythmic pressure and exploring and not feeling rushed. It's very interesting, just the kind of pressure that women often put on themselves of, I have to reach orgasm in this way at this time, paradoxically shuts down their ability to reach orgasm, because female sexual response is very connected to the autonomic nervous system, which goes to heart rate and engorgement and lubrication and all these great things that you want if you're a woman, or if you're making love to a woman, you want them to happen. And the thing that shuts down the autonomic nervous system is a sense of pressure or anxiety or, stress. So paradoxically, those images of the magical simultaneous orgasm where nobody's doing anything special for the woman is just automatically not going to work for a substantial majority of women. So I'd much rather kids these days, or anyone, learned about women's real anatomy and their real pacing and their real needs to have basically lots of attention paid to them.
Yes.
That's really what it comes down to.
Absolutely. We have about 2 minutes left, so I wanted to jump in here for one last question. I wanted to talk about the relationship between sexuality and happiness, because anthropologist Helen Fisher talks about how humans weren't built for happiness. We're animals. I mean, we're built to reproduce, which is why we can hold conflicting romantic feelings about multiple partners maybe at the same time. How can we recognize that fact while still maintaining true to one partner?
Well, you're asking a really tough question here. I mean, I think Helen Fisher's work is fantastic, but we're more than animals. I mean, her fascinating insight is that, women, female mammals, are as adulterous as male mammals because it's good, sperm competition, it's good for reproduction to have affairs, basically, in the wild if you're female. And, we're not in the wild. We're primates, but we have a superego, and I think that it's healthy to recognize that women have, passions and fantasies and desires that are not necessarily good girl, or good wife instincts, just like men do, but that, just like we can reasonably expect men and women, when they make a commitment, to kind of try to get a grip on that and transcend it, and find satisfaction in monogamous relationships, or do everything they can to do so. And, I think there are a lot of interesting traditions to draw on, like Tantra. A lot of people have found that in learning about Tantra and learning about a different way of making love, monogamy, which is sort of designed to get boring after 2 years, becomes much more fulfilling. So I think, the bottom line is exploration and consciousness. I'm all for that. We're animals, but we also have, a higher self.
Thank you so much, Naomi Wolf, co-founder of the DailyClout.com best-selling author. Thank you so much for your incredible insight.